Okay, so nice new clean recording. So right off the bat, we go right into the material. First of all, I want to thank you all for taking the time and spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited about this. We do actually have a course on this subject, which I recorded last year, I think, maybe it was the year before, but it's got like over 6 hours of video content, and it's spread over 4 lessons, and each one has a very detailed, very nicely formatted workbook, one of which I'll probably be sharing with you at some point today. So you'll get a peek at what that looks like. So if you like what you see here, stick around to the end. I'm going to sort of explain to you, obviously, how and where you can access that course. And I have an offer I want to share with you for those of you who've attended this webinar. And if you do have to jump out early, don't worry. I'm going to send some follow-up emails explaining what the deal is, and you'll have, pretty much the next few days to act on it if you want it. But Excel versus Google Sheets is something I want to do. Obviously, I was born with Excel. I was born with Excel in my mouth. Actually, I wasn't. I was born with Lotus 1-2-3 in my mouth, the DOS version. That's how old I am. That's how old and crusty I am. But obviously, as things evolved, does anybody know what the first spreadsheet was? What it was called? The original spreadsheet? It was designed by a Harvard engineering professor, and he was trying to make complex calculations much more efficient to calculate. So like imagine, and I remember when I first joined my first auditing job, and people were sitting there with 10 keys trying to add up like large lists of numbers. And, if you screw up one number on that, you're screwed. You got to start over, right? And it's a pain in the neck. So I started doing this in a spreadsheet, saying, well, that's dumb. If I do it in a spreadsheet in a column, it's just like a 10 key, and I can print that if somebody desperately wants the paper. But this way, if I screw up a number, I can just change the one number and the whole calculation updates like magic. This is what I loved about spreadsheets back in the day. So if you do a little research, I think the history is interesting of spreadsheets. The first spreadsheet that was ever created was actually called VisiCalc. And if I can get my mouse onto the proper screen here, and I'll share my screen for you so you can see. I meant to do that actually by now. All right, so the first spreadsheet ever. Wait, let me check the chat. Did anybody get the answer? VisiCalc.
Yes, Donna did.
Yeah, but it wasn't by Apple. VisiCalc was created by a Harvard professor. He was an engineering professor specifically. Interestingly, the first version of Microsoft Excel was actually created for a Mac, not a PC. The original version of Excel was created for a Mac. The PC version came out later. I've got a write-up for today's webinar that actually has all this history in it because I just found it interesting, right? But let's take a look, and I'll show you what that first VisiCalc version of the spreadsheet was. Before Excel, there was VisiCalc originally, and there was Lotus 1-2-3, and then Corel, the company that made WordPerfect, also came out with Quattro Pro, and that was their clever marketing to pick up where Lotus 1-2-3 leaves off, as in Quattro, number 4, Quattro Pro, right? Surprised that wasn't like a lawsuit at some point. But anyway, this is what VisiCalc looked like. It was in the DOS version of, well, there was no Windows. I was going to say the DOS version of Windows. That's funny. But this is what it looked like. And like I was saying, the first version of Excel was actually released for the Mac, right? September 30th, 1985. And the first Windows version wasn't released until November 19th, 1987. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I'm going to skip quickly past some of this other info. Like I said, I'll get you access to the write-up. It will be in the blog when I post the recording so that you can, peruse this on your own time. But today I want to make sure there's plenty of time for the important part, which is going to be the demonstration of everything. So, and as I was kind of saying before we started recording, Google Sheets was born in the cloud. It has lived since its birth date in the browser, right? It was initially released March 9th, 2006. I thought it was also an interesting fact that it was written in JavaScript, for those of you who are into like the coding side of things. I don't know if it's still in JavaScript, right? And to a large extent, you can do the same things in both programs. I kind of alluded to this a couple minutes ago. There's a lot of things I'm going to show you today that you're going to see. I'm going to do it in Excel. I'm going to do it in Google Sheets, and you're going to see it works exactly the same way. But then there are some things that Excel does better and some things that Google Sheets does better. And we're going to look at a few of those things and examples of those as well. So now let's get on to part two. Part one was kind of the quick history, right? And what's the difference between the two? So now we want to learn and improve your skills in either platform. And so you'll truly never improve your skills unless you get a use case for something like this. It is so robust and so broad in terms of what you can do with a spreadsheet that it's sort of like going to somebody and saying, I want to learn how to use Photoshop. Well, it's like, what do you want to learn how to do with Photoshop? There's so many things you could do with it that you can't start there. You have to be more specific. So the best way to learn is to have a use case for it so you can go to work developing that use case. And that's where you kind of start figuring out what you need to learn in order to do the thing that you need to do, right? And of course, you should challenge yourself, spend some time thinking about what you want to accomplish, in either of these applications. And it may not be a bad idea if you're in kind of learning mode to practice doing the same things in both. So today I'm going to go through a few exercises with you using some exercise files that I've used a lot in 97 and up. And in 97 and up, I make the exercise files available. In the course, I make the same exercise files available so you can download and practice what you're learning. One of the things that I struggle with, frankly, is I'll do one of these kinds of classes and everybody watches it and they're kind of amazed and wowed at all the amazing things you can do with these products. But if you don't actually get in there and start doing it yourself, all it is it's going to be like watching a cool movie, right? It's going to be like, wow, that was cool. You'll have a good experience, but you won't actually get to put much of it to use. So I don't have time today to do the interactive class. But one of the things I'm going to talk to you about at the end of today is I am going to offer a 4-hour workshop for those of you who want to attend. Where you will get a copy of the exercise file. We will do the exercise. You will share your screen. I will look over your shoulder and walk you through and make sure that you can complete whatever I've completed on each exercise that we go through. So the point is, this has to be hands-on by nature, right? So if I approach you with something like this, like here's everything you can learn to do with a spreadsheet from basics to expert, I cross it out. It's impossible to teach that, right? You need to know what it is you want to do with the spreadsheet, what you hope to accomplish, right? So I'm going to use some sample data. As I said, we'll perform a series of actions, once in Excel, once in Google Sheets. And then, like I said, I'll invite you to take advantage of an opportunity to participate in the live workshop with me that'll run for 4 hours. That way, I have plenty of time, like I said, to look over your shoulder. So the only way you really develop your skills in either of these tools is to get in there and start working with it. Use the help files and check YouTube. There are a ton of videos. You'll find many of mine on different topics of Excel or Google Sheets. And most of my focus, you'll notice, especially in recent years, is in Google Sheets. But I'll always indicate, like, one thing that I did recently was on a formula that's called SUMIFS. And it's a fairly complex version of a SUMIF, and it took me hours to kind of learn it and figure it out. And then I did a video on it, and I make it clear in that video that it works exactly the same way in Excel. I just teach it in Google Sheets because that's my preferred tool between the two when I can. But like I said, there are times, and I'm going to explain when those are, that I use Excel because certain things it's just better and faster at doing, right? So I also want to mention that ChatGPT, which you've probably been hearing a lot about lately, is a great resource where you can learn how to write formulas or ask it to teach you. And the screenshot's probably a little hard to see. Again, in the write-up, you'll get a high-res version of it that you can click to look at up closely. But I asked ChatGPT, how does the SUMIFS formula work? And it gives you a nice little explanation of how to use the formula. You can even be more specific and give it the details of your data, and it will kind of write the formula for you, but that might take some effort in terms of understanding how to write the prompt properly in order to get the right result, right? So the most common use case for me talking about the SUMIFS formula, what it allows you to do, by the way, is it allows you to cross-reference like a date and, let's say, the name of an account. And so I can look at a range of dates rather than a single date. And I can say, anytime you see that the date is in X year, whatever the year is, add up anything that's in the row that has this account name, right? In simple English terms, that's what the formula enables you to ask it to do, so that when I'm doing a forecast, I have a monthly layout, right? So I have January through December monthly financials, let's say for a P&L. I don't want to break up the continuity of that monthly layout by sticking in annual totals in the middle. because it's inefficient. If I want to copy formulas to the right, I've got to stop every time I get to the year, skip over a column and probably rewrite all the formulas. It's very, very sort of poor form, if you will. So what I want to be able to do is not even include yearly totals in that, but create a separate tab in the spreadsheet that can tabulate the yearly totals. The SUMIFS formula makes this very, very easy to do, where I can have just a column for each year and have it look into the source data and say, look across in the source data, and wherever you see that it's the year 2022 and the account is office supplies, add up every number that's in the office supplies row, where the data is also in that same year. And I use this on every client's forecast that I do. And it makes it really easy so that even as I make updates to the P&L, if I add a new account in there or whatever, all I have to do is copy and paste the formula down in the annual summary and boom, it's done. So very, very efficient. And there's an example of a complex formula, but how if you take the time, and it might be hours, it took me hours to really understand SUMIFS, but in the long run, it saves me many, many more hours than what I spent learning it, right? So again, it gives me a dynamic way to cross-reference the year in the account to add up all the items in a row that match both criteria. In other words, it's in the same year and the same account. Okay, this is a pretty advanced formula, like I said, and as I said, it took me hours to perfect, but now it's second nature because I took the time to learn it. And so now I don't have to think twice about it. If it's been a while, I may have to reference like some other client's forecast and just quickly review like how I laid out the formula and how I did everything. And, probably in 5 minutes, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, now I remember, now I get it, right? And like I said, this formula is not an exception to the rule. It works exactly the same way in both spreadsheet applications, both Google and Excel, okay? So now let's talk about where one shines over the other, okay? Which one should I use exclusively, Seth? I got some of those questions from some of you while you were registering. And my answer to you is going to be a little disappointing, right? Because the truth is right now, my feeling is that you're going to want to learn to use both. That the best thing you can do is have both of these tools in your toolbox, because like me, you're going to find that there are times when Excel is just a better tool because it's easier to just whip it out and do something really quick, depending on, again, exactly what you're trying to do. And there are cases where Google Sheets definitely works much better, especially if the nature of what you're doing is going to be collaborative, right? And we'll talk about that. So we're going to open up a CSV file from a bank, okay? And this is an example of where Excel is much faster, right? To get a CSV file open in Google Sheets, it's like an extra step or two. I've got to make sure I save that CSV in a Google Drive folder, and then I can pretty quickly open it up in Google Drive. And from there, it's about the same, right? So again, this is one thing where if I just quickly need to format that CSV download from that bank because I'm trying to identify where my difference is on a bank rec, I'm probably going to do that in Excel, right? And that's a pretty hard and fast rule, to be honest with you. Now, by the way, speaking of that, because there may be cases where I do want to take the extra step and get it in Google Sheets, especially when I'm thinking about retrieval, right? There's two things that I think about in terms of work and work management and workflow. There's transmission, and then there's retrieval. Transmission in this case is I just quickly need to cut up the bank statement so I can sort it by amount or whatever I need to do to quickly figure out where I'm off on either deposits or outgoing money. Retrieval would look at what's coming after that. Do I need to reference this in 30 days from now? And if I do, how easy will it be to find it and share it if I need to, right? So on that side of things, oftentimes for me, this is my choice, I like Google Sheets better, because if I can take the time now, spend a few extra minutes, convert it into Google Sheets and save it somewhere, much easier to access and share with somebody from there. Okay. Some clients will insist on using Microsoft Excel, which is another reason, even if you love Google Sheets, that you still, in my opinion, have to be versed in Excel and have to be prepared to use it and not be sort of overwhelmed by it because you've been just working in Google Sheets for the last 5 years or whatever it's been, right? Some clients, I experience this myself regularly, where they will just send me an Excel file. And if it's something that I need to work on and then kind of give back to them, I can't convert it to Google Sheets. I theoretically, I could convert it to Google Sheets, work on it, convert it back to Excel and send it. But that has a way of screwing up formatting because the color palettes are not consistent between the two applications. So if I convert to Google Sheets and back to Excel, and the intention is to send it back to that accounting firm who needs to work with it, I might sort of piss them off, right? Because I'm going to mess up the formatting. So for use case,
quickly, one of the questions was, can you do pivot tables in Google Sheets?
yes.
So I thought so. Is that something you're going to be covering in this?
I don't recall. Time dependent. There is an exercise we have where I can quickly show you how to do pivot tables, and it's actually very easy to do in Google Sheets. It's visually, Excel's pivot tables look much nicer, especially when you get into the formatting palettes. But there actually, I can point out some things that I really like about Google Sheets, the functionality of pivot tables in terms of the choices you have as far as how you can lay out the data. But it definitely does pivot tables just as easily as Excel does. So, but the main difference, like I said, is Excel's look nicer. Excel's are prettier. Okay. So let's talk about online collaboration and publishing. This is where Google Sheets outshines Excel in every possible way, right? There's a lot of friction trying to get something shared in Excel. And in fact, I just recently got an Excel file from a CPA firm. I couldn't open it because I'm not in their SharePoint domain. And so they had to then take it out of the SharePoint domain as a separate file and send it to me via email, which defeats the whole purpose of having it in SharePoint, which was the security, I'm assuming, right? So, and that cost us literally an extra day of me getting the file and then looking at it, getting back to them and saying, I can't open this. And then a day later, they got back to me and sent the file. So the delays in this kind of thing is significant, right? And mind you, Google Workspace has very, very good AICPA SOC report compliant security, contrary to what a lot of people will say on social media. Okay, publishing your spreadsheet content to the web with Google Sheets. This is very, very easy to do. I will demonstrate this for you. You can click File and then Share, and then there's a Publish to Web option, and I can embed a Google Sheet project on a web page, on a Notion page, anywhere I need to. I don't know exactly how you can do that in Excel. I imagine there's probably a way if you're using Excel in Office 365 on the web. I haven't played with it. I'm sure Matthew can fill in the blanks there.
You can do it. You're going to run into some of the same security challenges. So Google Sheets is definitely a lot easier to embed into different programs where you want interaction from other people, hands down.
Yep. Yep. So, and with Google Drive in 2 clicks, I can share with anyone who has a Google account. They don't need to be in my domain, which, as I've come to understand it, is how SharePoint works. I had a client who was trying to share his files with me. He had to set up an email for me on his domain in order for him to share it with me. He wasn't able, it didn't seem, to just share it. I have a Microsoft Office account associated with my Nerd Enterprises email, but he told me there was no way he could share it with that email, even though I had a Microsoft account. By contrast with Google, if you have even a free Gmail account, I can share with you. Free Gmail doesn't come with the security that Google Workspace, the paid Google account, comes with, which again, SOC compliant, but so there's plenty of security there. But so the difference there is, as long as you have a Google account, which I don't know anybody who doesn't by now, then you're able to share very easily with people. That was one of the questions somebody asked in registration, was about sharing. Now, if I want to share with somebody without having to be logged into a Google account, I can, but only on a view-only basis, and that goes to security, right? The fact that somebody is required to be logged into a Google account is a significant layer of security, as in, granted, these things can be hacked, but it puts on a lot more security in terms of theoretically being able to identify who it is that's accessing that document, right? Okay, Google has revision history, where I can click File and see the version history, and I can see exactly what changes were made and by whom, and I can even proactively save the current version of it and name it. And I did this recently where I was updating a model and the client had added in a row that wasn't in the chart of accounts. And so when I was making my update, I overwrote that row. It was something the client was planning on having come into their, what do you call it? They were planning on having it show up in their financials in the future, but it wasn't there yet. So I lost that row, and the data that she had worked on, calculating, I was able to solve it in a fraction of the time it would have taken and save her from having to recreate it by marking the current version and naming it so that I could make a copy of that current version, then go back to the original and access her data from the version history, restore that version for a minute, took her data, copied it into that temporary copy that I made. So I just did a swap. Then I restored the source back to the current version, which was named so it was easily identified. And then I was able to kind of copy and paste her data back into the updated version that had the updated financials in there. And I also placed her row like below everything and explained to her that like you can't add something inside the chart of accounts until it actually appears in the chart of accounts. So, and going to the question of how do you know, you would know if you had it because you have to pay for Google in order to have Google Workspace. It's not something that you would just sort of stumble into, right? You have to go through the process of actually setting up your domain and choosing a plan and so on and so forth.
Other question, Seth, and you touched base on this, but just as a key point to it again, the idea of uploading something from Excel to Google and then back down, like if you had to go back to Excel, you can do these round trips, but there's always formatting issue. There may be formatting issues, challenges. Generally, formulas, everything else, if you have Excel and go to Google, works great.
Yeah.
You can come back, works great. But if it has to be cosmetically beautiful and perfectly aligned, that's where there's usually some challenges.
Yeah, that was my point from earlier, but thank you for clarifying that, Matthew. The only thing I've experienced in terms of round trip conversions is formatting issues. All the formulas work exactly the same way. Pivot tables will be gone. If you have a pivot table in Excel and you convert to Google Sheets, that pivot table will not translate, because the Google Sheets way of doing pivot tables is like on a completely different footing, I guess, or something. So you'll get the data presented, but it will no longer be a pivot table. It'll just be like hard numbers in whatever the layout was at the time you converted. So you definitely want to be careful about stuff like that. So which one is better for you? Like I said, I do 95% of my spreadsheet work in Google Sheets, but I still maintain my Office subscription because there are times when I want to get something done very quickly and Excel is just faster for certain things. Most of the time, however, Google Sheets is the time saver for me, especially when I need to share or collaborate with somebody. So now let's do the demo. This is what I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for, and then we'll come back to this. So it's demo time. Let me bring up an example of my exercise files. And let's see, what do I want to do first here? Let's look at the bank statement example. I have an example of a CSV file from a bank account from many, many years ago in a galaxy very, very far away. So let's go into my folder here and bear with me while I find the file I want. There it is. So I'm going to open this as a CSV file in Excel. Okay. Can everybody see this on my screen?
Yep.
It should be visible. Okay, so here's a CSV file. This is a real monthly bank statement from an old Wells Fargo account that I had back in 2018. Okay. So this is how it comes. It's raw. It's not well formatted, right? So the first thing I do, by the way, is save as and make sure I've converted it to a proper Excel file, because I've made the mistake of not remembering to do that and then, saving it quickly without confirming that I want to change the format. And I end up saving the CSV file with all the formatting and losing all the formatting, right? So don't make that mistake. Good practice. Just the first thing you do when you open up the CSV file is immediately convert it to Excel. So now I've got the bank statement here, and what I want to do is first let's format my dates, right? So Control Shift down arrow, Control and the number 1. And that brings up my format cells dialog. And since it recognizes the type of data that it's looking at, it goes straight to date. And now this is my preferred option for formatting dates in anything financial, because this way everything lines up no matter what part of the year you're in, right? Because everything is double digits across the board. Okay, so that's something I frequently do. All right, let's just quickly freeze the panes, view, freeze panes. So I get my first row there, right? And then maybe make these bold just to make it stand out a little bit. Okay, let's remove the balance column because I don't really care about the balance for this purpose, right? By the way, another thing I do before I do that, I just undid that, Control Z. I always like to preserve what I've downloaded just in case I need to get back to it, so I don't have to go back onto the bank account website and download it again. So this trick always blows people away. So notice my mouse is over the tab at the very bottom. Holding down Control, click and drag to the right makes a perfect duplicate of that tab. Everybody always loves that tip. So now we can play. And that way I can very quickly and conveniently get back anything that I've changed here while I'm doing this. So let's set up a single column for just the amount, right? This one comes down in debits and credits. I want the total amount. right? Very simple way to do this is I'm just going to take, remember, this is from a bank account. So credits are additions, debits are subtractions, right? It's not accounting debits and credits. So we take credits minus debits. And shift down arrow is what I'm doing here to get down to wherever the bottom is, and Control V to paste, right? And now let's say I want to format these better. Shift page down does a large scroll while selecting. The shift key is what tells it to select as I move. Okay, and then, oops, didn't want to go there. And let's go back to the home tab here, and I'll just format these for currency, right? Widen that up. Okay. And of course, we can quickly play with our numeric formatting here with negative numbers. So I can change this to, let's just say number, red in brackets, so that negative numbers stand out very clearly, right? Easy to do. Most of you probably know how to do everything I just showed you, right? But just a real live use case, right? I've gotten a bank statement, and now with what I have here, it would be very quick and easy. And what I typically do is I'll make another copy of this tab for money out and another copy for money in, and then I'll remove all the debits on one, remove all the credits on the other, so I can quickly sort and find things, especially if the goal here is to identify a difference on a bank rec. And I do this anytime there's a difference on a bank rec. I've learned to stop wasting time trying to find it manually. This process is always faster. I don't care how many transactions there are. With this process, I can find the difference in 15 minutes or less, always, without exception. Now let's do the same thing in Google Sheets, right? So in Google Sheets, by the way, I'll show you a little Google Sheets trick. It's more of a broader Google Docs trick, right? So here I am in Windows Explorer, right? And let's say I want to open this same file here in Google Sheets, right click, open with Google Drive. Okay, because it's a CSV file. If it was an actual Excel file, it would have invited me right away to open it with Google Sheets. So this is a generic like preview screen. Now I say open with Google Sheets. And now I have it open in a Google Sheets format, right? Now let's quickly, just so you can see the difference, let's do it with the Excel version. Okay, so I right click that. Notice here the choice is open with Google Sheets, because now it recognizes I'm opening an actual spreadsheet as opposed to a CSV file. All right, so it's going to go right in and watch what it does here. Notice it does the .xlsx thing. This lets me know that it is still an Excel file. It is giving me the ability to edit an Excel file using Google Sheets. So once I leave this, if I don't do anything different, it will still remain as an Excel file that can be opened or sent or whatever. I'm just using Google Sheets as the sort of client to open up and work with that spreadsheet. So this is another option if you're working on something that, and you prefer to be in Google Sheets, but you know it ultimately has to remain an Excel file going back to a client, you'll still probably lose some formatting here, and you'll definitely lose a pivot table if there was one in here when you do this, right? Now to make it
back real quick to the other one, just to visually, because
yeah,
show the difference between them, because the way they lay out's a little bit different on also, right?
No, the layout comes in basically the same. If you look here versus here, it's pretty much the same. But the main difference was opening up the CSV file, I had to go through this preview screen first, right? So there's one extra step with the CSV file. Now, if I want to permanently convert this to Google Sheets, then File, Save as Google Sheets. Okay, and if I want to get this back to, let's say I've done a bunch of work and I'm like, you know what, I need this in Excel now, then File, Download, and I would spend time remembering all the choices, right? You can do it as Excel. You can use Open Document, which I've never used in my life. You can save it as a PDF, a web page. You can save it back to a CSV or tab separated values, which is similar to CSV. It's just a different delimiter that's separating the data, right? Now let's get to work in Google Sheets and do the same stuff that we had just done in Excel. So double click between any two columns while it's all selected, and it auto sizes all the columns exactly the way I need, right? Highlight across, Control B to bold, right? Let's go freeze the pane. So view, freeze, one row, okay? That way I can always see my headers no matter how far down I go. let's make a copy. So here I don't have the control click. I just right click and choose duplicate. Right. So that's how I preserve what I downloaded. Control minus, keyboard shortcuts, by the way. One of the complaints I heard over the years from people who were trying to get from Excel to Google Sheets was they're so used to the keyboard shortcuts. I was too. You can turn on the legacy keyboard shortcuts in the options. I have, excuse me, the link in the write-up. I'll bring it up on screen real quick to show you, just for the doubters out there, so that you believe me that it is true and possible to do this, because we know about all the disinformation campaigns that are out there today. I didn't mean to do that. So keyboard shortcuts, right? And somewhere in here, it actually tells you where to go to turn them on. But essentially, I can tell you where to go. You're going to go to Tools, I think. It's like in the settings or the preferences or something like that. There it is, settings. And nope, I'll come back. I don't want to waste time on this now. There's a specific place you go in the settings where you can turn on the preference to invoke the legacy keyboard shortcuts and everything that you're used to in Excel in terms of like what I just did to highlight the column. Control spacebar highlights the whole column. Control minus then will delete that entire highlighted column, right? Shift spacebar once highlights all the data in that row, a second time highlights the entire row, and control minus would delete the whole row, right? So that is how you get over the hump of being in love with your keyboard shortcuts. I am still in love with them myself. I would not know what to do without them, right? And then, so to set up the single amount column, control spacebar, control shift plus. It wants to confirm because I forgot to do control spacebar again to highlight the whole column, right? So it only highlighted the data. So it still needs to ask me, do I want to actually insert and shift down or shift right, right? So let me back up and control spacebar again. Now, if you were paying attention to the E column header there, it lit up in more of a blue. That's how I know the entire column is actually selected. Amount equals credits minus debits. Google auto suggests, so control enter will confirm that I want to do what it was auto suggesting. Excel has a similar like fill command, but this one came up by default. And now let's get these formatted like numbers. Shift page down, same thing. Okay, and $sign. And since I showed you how to custom format the numbers in Excel, we'll do the same thing here. If I hit Control 1, again, legacy, it will bring up this whole format menu, but then you still have to go to number, which you could do with, by tapping the N. So if you pay attention to the underscored letters in each of these menus, you can start to learn the keyboard shortcuts that you need that won't necessarily be the same as what you've gotten used to in Excel. But down here, I can go to custom currency or custom date and time. And here I can, go play around with different formatting and apply that, right? So again, format number, I can choose from the preset formats or just go to custom number format. Actually is a little bit more versatile. So here you get the generic, just like you have in Excel, where I can say, hey, and down here I can see where I can just click on this so that it will show negative numbers in red and brackets and hit apply and boom, now I've got that done, right? So again, now you've just seen the same process in both spreadsheets with the use case of quickly formatting a CSV download of a bank statement, okay? And by the way, in the course that I have, like I mentioned before, that's like 6 hours, you have all of this information laid out. This is linked in the lesson, laid out nicely here. Here's a link to access the keyboard shortcuts thing, right? It's all here. So that's available, for any of you who are in the course. And for those of you who are in 97 and up, you have access to that course. It's included. All right, let's look at another example because we're already running kind of low on time, but luckily I've almost gotten through what I want to show you. So now we're going to look at some more robust stuff. And this is where, if I can breeze a little quickly through it, I can actually probably get to pivot tables for you. So let me just close all these tabs. And I'm going to open up something else on my other screen for quick reference here. Okay, we're going to look at the simple cash flow analysis now. And I want to, this is the purpose of what I'm going to do next is to talk about formatting a little bit. I'm going to open up this formatting data spreadsheet in Excel. Okay, and what I did was I've got the formatted version here, right? And you can see how nice that looks. I mean, how many times do you get a spreadsheet from somebody and it's just a black and white wall of numbers and the borders are still all on and there's that thick black and you look at that and you're like, I don't want to look at this. Like all right, I'm taking the rest of the day off because I just don't want to look at this. It's like terrible, right? And you can see right away how much more visually appealing, how much more inviting this is. I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at something like this and I'm like, okay, somebody took the time here to present this data nicely. It was important to them to make it appealing to me to want to actually look at and spend time with this data. So this is a very, very simple kind of cash flow analysis that I laid out just for the purpose of illustrating, some of what you can do with the formatting, right? Now, what you may not know is that this color green is the actual QuickBooks brand green color. How do I know that? Because I did a Google search for Intuit or QuickBooks branding guidelines, and I found a web page that they have that's meant for developers, but it's accessible by anyone. And they give you the hex codes for the different shades of green that they use in their logos and things. And so I took one of them, the one that I liked best, and I formatted it. So how did I do that? Well, let's go to the raw version, which I have in another tab here, right? And so let's say I want to format this one. So I'm going to highlight the whole row. First of all, the first thing I do, because I just hate the grid lines with a passion, is I come in here and I turn them off. I like borders. That gives me control over where I put lines and how light or thick they are. So I turn off the grid lines. I'm going to highlight this whole row. And I can do this one of two ways. If I'm on the home tab here, I can get into my color palette and I can go to more colors. Okay. And then I go to custom. And I took the time ahead of time to copy the hex code that I used for that color green. So I'm going to copy that from my other screen, noting that it includes the little hashtag and the hex code. So I'm going to get rid of that one and paste in mine. And you can see in the preview, the new is going to be that nice green. Click OK. And before I click away, while this is still highlighted, I want the font to be white because it'll just show up so much better. Right. Now the title here with the date timeline, Control-1 is the other way. I can get into my colors. I can go to fill. I can go to more colors and I can pick a custom color for the header, right? Something nice and subtle, but that'll make it kind of stand out. And boom. So now I've got a nice little color for my headers there, right? Matt says hex codes are a colorblind guy's favorite friend. Okay, and then we can, the totals I kind of left formatted because I'm sure you all know how to apply bold formatting to something, right? The other thing we may want to do that I do is the grid lines. So let's come down and let's just select all this data. And I'll show you how I do the grid lines real quick. And it's these subtle little things that make it so much more pleasant to look at. So I've got this whole region highlighted. Again, I can use the grid line drop down here. Okay. And what I want to do here is actually, I'm going to use the Control-1 because that's a little bit easier dialogue to work with on this. So if I go here to border, over here, I can select the color. Okay. And let's just pick like a nice light gray. Okay. But notice when you do that, the previews turn light gray. So before I do that, let's turn them back to the black so I can see. I just want like a dotted gray line here. And now we'll change it to light gray because I will no longer need to see it. And then I'm just going to say, give me the inside and the outline and click OK. And when I click away now, I somehow missed part of this. So let's go back, watch this trick. So let's go back up to the top, scroll down, shift click, just selects the whole range in between from the top left to the bottom right, and Control-Y repeats the last action. So that was a quick way, since I had just done it, to get the grid lines on the part that I missed. Now it's subtle, but it makes a difference. It gives your eyes the guide they need to see across, but doesn't overwhelm you with this like thick black border, where it makes the whole thing kind of noisy to look at. Okay. Now let's do the same thing in Google Sheets, right? So let's go here. And this time I'm just going to take this, open with Google Sheets. And let me bring it onto this screen. I hadn't saved it yet, so I still got, what I had started with. Okay. File, save as Google Sheets. Let's go to the raw data. I'm going to select this whole row. Here's my paint palette. Okay. And then conditional form, not conditional formatting, I want custom. It happens to be here already because I've used it recently. But if I want to go pick a custom color, or add rather, then I can paste my hex code right in there. It finds it. I'll click OK. And again, I want my white font. Okay. View, show, grid lines. So you have all the same features. They're just laid out differently, right? So that takes a little getting used to, right? Let's go, forget that way of doing it. Let's do something here, something similar to maybe what I did, right? I get a nice little outline, and now let's do my grid lines. If you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, please get a mouse with a scroll wheel. It just makes life so much easier for doing stuff like this. Here's my border palette. Again, here I'm going to choose a light gray. Over here, I'm going to choose the style. And then I'm going to choose this one. And so now I've got my very subtle grid lines. For some of you, it may even be hard to see that they're there, but rest assured, when you're looking at it on your own screen, they are there. They're subtle, but effective. And then I might put a thicker border like around the totals to make those stand out a little bit more. Okay. Before I go on to the last demonstration part, any questions? Everybody's all good. It's nice and quiet. Okay. Now let's go on to the next part. We're gonna look at some sales data. Okay. So I'm going to open up this CSV file in Excel. Let me kind of close everything else. Sure, we can save. Save it. Okay. Sales data. This is a very old exercise file that I've been using for years because it's just good data to play with. Okay. So I opened up the CSV. Let's save as. And let's turn it into Excel before I forget right away. Save. And here I have clearly what lends itself to a data table, right? So Matthew, you're going to love this part. I'm going to highlight the whole region. I'll use the scroll wheel on my mouse to make sure I've gotten truly to the bottom. Control T as in table. It knows the range because I've selected it. So I can, and just want to make sure that this little box is checked off that says my table has headers, unless of course yours doesn't. Click OK, and instantly it converts into a table, which gives it sort of superpowers, right? Notice it immediately gave me the filters, so I can quickly filter, and I can say, you know what, I only want to see the product called Alice Mutton. Okay, so those filters give me a powerful way right off the bat to, you know, chisel the data down and focus on whatever I want to focus on. It's like running reports basically on the data. Okay. Now what I want to do though, because the data is a little bit limited, right? It gives me the unit purchase price and the quantity, and it gives me a discount level and percentage, but I don't know what my order totals are, right? So these are orders that were placed, and the names you see, the individuals' names in columns B and C, are salespeople who are responsible for these orders. So let's add the columns real quick so that we can get a proper data set looking at the total of the orders and everything, right? So the first thing I want to see is what's the subtotal before any discount, right? As soon as I add a new column header immediately adjacent to the table, Excel is smart enough to say, oh, okay, we probably want to expand the table, and it does that for me, okay? Equals purchase price times the quantity. Okay, because we're in a table, now Excel was smart about this and it automatically filled in the whole thing. It figures, okay, if we're doing it there, we want to do it across the board. Okay, if for any reason you ever don't want it to do that, you just hit Control Z and it will back it up one step to just the one formula that you had written. Okay, now I want the discount in dollars. Okay, so we're going to take the subtotal, or let's do it this way, the discount level times the subtotal. Okay, but one thing I also want to do, I'm going to start over, is for presentation purposes, the discount is going to be reducing, it's going to be reducing the subtotal to get to the net order total. So whenever I'm doing something like that, I could put it in here as a positive dollar amount and then subtract it. But to the end user who's going to come looking at this, it's not going to be clear. I've experienced that confusion where I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't adding up, because my brain assumes it should be added up because I see two positive numbers. So I always take that into account when I'm presenting data like this. So I'm going to start it with a negative equals negative. Okay. Discount level times subtotal. Just sort of what I call good form, I always start with the variable that's on my left and work my way to the right so that the formula kind of follows the same flow as the columns that it's based on, right? That's one of my own little personal sort of best practices. Okay, and now I can get the net order, which is simply going to be the sum now. Now I can just add them of the subtotal and the discount. Okay, and now this makes a lot of sense, right? When creating the formulas in a table, it uses the column header to help you visually see your formula. Yes, that's right. So that's a good thing I didn't point out. So notice the formula itself, it has a different kind of syntax. It is using the column headers for each of the components in the formula, which does make it easier for, somebody who's not real formulaic in their brain to look at this, and you can clearly see what's going on, right? I'm looking at a sum here. I'm looking at the discount level times the subtotal. It's much easier to read the formulas this way. Okay, so now let's do a quick pivot table, right? I showed you the filter already, so I can filter this all day. There are numeric based filters where I can say, show me all the orders over a certain amount. So you go to number filters here, and I can say, show me the top 10, above average, below average. This is the kind of thing that you should just play with. Go play with it and learn what it can do so that you're aware of the possibilities when you're analyzing real live data. So now to create a pivot table from this, very easy to do. Okay, a lot of people think pivot tables are like these incredibly advanced things. They're not. When you're creating a pivot table, you're just designing a report, and you're telling Excel what goes in the rows and what goes in the columns, and you have lots of dimensions because you can do layers deep of subtotals. So it takes what you can do in a QuickBooks Online report or even desktop, and it expands on it exponentially, right? Because I can't really do more than one single level of subtotals in a report in QuickBooks. QuickBooks Online Advanced is getting there with its advanced reporting features, but even that's not quite there yet. So Elaine is asking, what is a pivot table? Well, I'm glad you asked because you're about to find out. So let's do it. While I've got this area formatted like a table, and just so you're aware, if I move my cell pointer off of the region where the table is, my table design tab up here goes away. So if you find yourself looking for it and that's what's happening, probably because you clicked away outside here, just click back on the table and the table design tab reappears, and we're going to click summarize with pivot table. So we designed a table and formatted it and customized it a little bit, and then we're going to use that to build a pivot table. Okay. So I click OK, and like I said, blank report. So let's say that I want to see the countries in the rows, right? I want to see sales by country. And then let's go all the way down here, and we'll just look at the net order and put that in the values. While I'm here, I can right click and apply number formatting. So it's easier to read. So now I have a report that shows me sales by country. Okay. And now let's put the order date in the columns, let's say, and boom. And Excel recognizes that these were dates, so it automatically does groupings. You can change that, but by default, it will group it by year. And then within each year, it has quarters. And then, of course, within each quarter, you can expand it to show the months. Okay. Does that automatically. This part specifically, Google Sheets does not do well in terms of pivot tables. It won't do this with dates in Google Sheets. You'll see in a minute because I'll show you that part next. But this is just a very, very quick tutorial on how you can quickly take a data that you have that's, where it's a lot of volume, and quickly summarize it and report on it. And there's all kinds of things you can do. And as I mentioned earlier, in the Excel pivot tables, you have some nice color palettes here that you can apply to make it look really slick and professional. Okay. But they are the fastest way to analyze data, as Matthew's pointing out in the chat. If you have a lot of data to analyze, this is the way to do it. Okay.
Real quickly, so you can also, by the way you arrange your columns and your rows, You can change the shape and what data you're looking at super easy just by clicking and moving.
Yeah.
Like if you want to put on, just click on last
Well, let's say I
name.
want to look at products within each country. I want to see which product sold in that country. I'll click from up here and drag it below country. And boom. So now I have the country of Argentina and all the products that sold, and it's grouped by year.
So click on the minus sign with Argentina so they can just see how that can shrink down.
So let's collapse all of it, right? That didn't work. So expand, collapse entire field. So now we still see each country with a plus sign where I can say, let's look at Brazil's sales and what products we sold in Brazil and in what year, right? So lots of cool things you can do there. All right, let me jump over because we're almost out of time. I want to go through the same process in Google Sheets. All right. So I'm going to open up Sales Data 1 XLS in Google Sheets just to save me the step with the CSV file. Okay. And we're going to say File, Save as Google Sheets. Now, Google Sheets doesn't have tables in the same sense that Excel does. So no, Google Sheets is not exactly the same as Google Docs. It's, you know, when you think of Google Docs, you think of the comparable product to Microsoft Word. That's a word processor. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet just like Excel, right? So that's the distinction. So Google Sheets is the spreadsheet, is Google's version of a spreadsheet product that you have access to with all of Google's. A lot of people, when they use the term Google Docs, they're thinking broadly, you know, all the types of documents that you can access, such as Google Docs itself, which again is word processing, Google Sheets, and there's Google Slides and Google Forms and so on and so forth, right? So in Google Sheets, you don't have a table per se, but here's what you have that's very close. So I'm going to select the whole range. Okay, and then when I go into the color area, there's alternating colors. When I choose that, I have color palettes that I can choose from. Okay, and then I'm going to freeze the top row. Okay, and here it doesn't automatically put filters on, but very easy to do. With the range selected, just create the filter. Okay, and you see they have these little like upside down funnel looking things. Those are your filter icons, so you can filter data just like you can in Excel. Works exactly the same way. Okay, and then we're going to quickly add in my other columns here, right? So I want order subtotal. Okay, and that's going to equal unit price times quantity. Again, autofill. I confirm with Control Enter. Okay, discount in dollars equals minus parentheses discount level times order subtotal, close parenthesis. Okay, and then net order total equals the sum of the order total and the discount, right? And then let's get these all formatted like currency. Okay, and notice it didn't carry the filters over because again, unlike Excel, that's just not kind of a function of, you know, I wouldn't even call this a table. It's just Google's closest equivalent. But watch this, with my cell pointer anywhere in the data set, I just go to data, I remove the filter, data again, and create the filter, and boom, then it's all there. So very easy to fix. Now to do the pivot table, unlike Excel, there's no option, like notice there's no table menu. There's no option like that. I'm just going to insert a pivot table. So what I like to do for something like this is select the whole data range. It will be smart enough to figure it out on its own, but this is a sure thing. So it's actually data. All right, and then pivot table, where'd you go? Where is it? Insert. It is insert. I always get confused about that. It's going to confirm the range, confirm that I want it in a new sheet, create. And now the process is the same. Now, Excel's version of this, it's purely click and drag. Here, I can actually use these add buttons. It's like a dumb little thing that I happen to like, that you have the flexibility of doing that, right? So again, I can put the country over here in the rows. Okay. I want the net order total here in the values. And then what else did we do? We had the product under the country. Okay. So we're getting the same kind of thing happening here. Okay. And then we had the dates. So this is where you're going to see Google Sheets fails a little. So I want the dates in the order date in the columns. And it's going to give us an error, and then it's probably going to calculate and it will come up, or it may not, because essentially what it's doing is it's going to put every single date in the entire data set in its own column. In other words, it doesn't have that grouping bucket capability. To do that here, I would have to add columns, and there's simple formulas to write where I can pull the year out of the date, and then I can pull the month out of the date, and then I can do what I need to do here. So with Google Sheets, there's a little bit of extra work in handling dates. But other than that, similar to what we saw in Excel, I can also, zip these up and summarize, right? Same way I did here. If I do expand all first and then right click, I can do collapse all, and boom, right? So same idea. I can get the same things done. Like I said, where the dates are concerned, there's kind of an extra step here, right? Okay, and then if you want to do a pivot chart in Excel, there's an actual function called pivot chart, which is really, really cool. Okay, so you go to insert, and it's in here somewhere. Oh, here it is, pivot chart, right? And it makes it really easy to plot this pivot table data out in a chart. To do the same thing in Google Sheets, you just have to select this whole range of pivot table data and then go insert chart, and it will work the same way. I don't have time to go into it, but I at least wanted you to see like kind of where to go. And then, like I said, with Google Sheets, I can go file, and I can say share, and I can say publish to web, and I can use just a link, or I can use embed. I can say entire document, publish, I'll confirm. And then I don't need to understand what any of this code means. I just need to know how to copy and paste it, right? And then I can copy and paste it into, say, a Notion page, right? Just real quick, just to show you what that looks like. I'm going to open up a blank page in Notion and bring it on my screen, because this is actually really cool. So if I wanted to share this Notion page with a client, very easy to do. Sample spreadsheet. Okay, I'm going to type /embed, and then just paste the code in and embed link, and Notion's going to do its magic. And boom, there it is. Right, and I can resize this and format it, right? So that is, the example of some of the ease with which you can collaborate and do online publishing with Google Sheets. That you can do it in Excel, but as Matthew will acknowledge, it's not nearly as easy to do, right? All right, so what's next? Here's what to do next. So I mentioned I was going to do this at the end, and here we are at the end. So I've got two options for you. You can access the course, right, which, like I said, has 6 hours, probably a little more of video training. There's a workbook for each of those lessons, similar to the one that I showed you. That was the workbook for page from one of those lessons. And the exercise files are included, the same sales data exercise file that I've worked with here. And I've got one or two others, I think, that we worked on in that course. And then, of course, the other option is that you can join 97 and up, and you'll have access to this and a whole bunch of other courses. What I'm doing that's special right now, as I said, is I'm going to offer anybody who participates now the option of, well, if you sign up for either, the course or 97 and up this week, and I'll send emails out following up with the information. And when the deadline is, then you will be given access included to a 4-hour workshop that I'm going to do, taking what we did today a whole lot further. And then, of course, 97 and up, you'll have the option to sign up at like a 25% discount from what it normally costs. So instead of $197 a month, it's $147 a month. I have to double check, so don't quote me on this, but I believe you do have to sign up for a whole year to take advantage of this. I don't think we included a monthly option. So you sign up for a year, you get it discounted, and then it renews after a year on a monthly basis for the same $147 a month. And we do stuff like this every single week in 97 and up. Every week we have 2 1-hour calls on Tuesday and Thursday. All those calls are recorded and posted to the website, only accessible to members, where you can go back. So even if you can't make the live sessions, you can review those recordings. So that's kind of the deal, right? 4-hour workshop. Obviously, people who are here who are in 97 up already, yes, of course, you'll be invited to access this. So you'll get the discount for a year. It will renew after a year for the same discounted $147 a month. And of course, you can cancel anytime. And that's basically the deal for today. So I'll stick around if anybody has any more questions or anything, or wants to share. And while we're waiting for people to unmute or chime in the chat or the Q&A, you know, again, this is what one of the sort of workbooks looks like from, this is now lesson 2 in the course, and it just goes deep on formatting your data, right? Turning off the grid lines. Here's the simple cash flow analysis, and it walks you through from a blank step-by-step in both products, you know, how to build that whole thing from a blank, right? You can see kind of the iterations here, and it shows you the differences. Here's how to get the formatting done in Excel. Here's how to get the formatting done in Google Sheets, all right? Little dancing monkey. It's always important to have a dancing monkey in your course content. It's not complete without that. I didn't have time to cover this today, but I show you how to dynamically set up those dates in the columns, the borders, you know, everything's in here. So you'll have access to all of that. And if you are interested in taking advantage of this, just email me. I'll be sending emails to follow up. I'll send one later today, you know, of course, thanking you for joining and all that. And then, and that will have the information and the links where you can sign up for either of those things. What is so the workshop's included if you sign up for 97 and up, or if you sign up for the course, right? So the course is, if you just want that Excel versus Google Sheets course, which is the whole 6-hour deep dive on all this, that's $197 one-time lifetime access, or my lifetime, basically. When I die, the course goes offline. You'll be given, my wife has been instructed to give you 30 days to download it when I die. That's a morbid thought. And then, of course, if you sign up for 97 and up, you have access to this and all the other courses, and the workshop also would be included. And the workshop will be included either way. And then, of course, 97 and up gives you access to this and a whole bunch of other courses, as long as you stay a member. 97 and up is my mentoring program, my mastermind group, as I prefer to call it. You know, Greg, Matthew, why don't one of you tell them about it? So it's probably better they hear it from one of you versus me, because I'm obviously biased. You two are probably a little biased too by now, but anyway.
Of course, we're quite biased, and it's a group of nerd friends. That's what I refer to it as, my nerd group, and it's a mastermind group that I've been a part of now for probably 5 or 6 years, I think. And we meet twice a week, as well as have a very active Slack workspace. And what I get out of it is camaraderie, as well as the sounding board to bounce ideas off of other folks in my shoes. Yeah, and then we also get all this fun stuff, all these fun courses as well, a number of them that Seth offers up to us, included in the membership.
Yeah. And then I offer deep discounts for all the major, like, bulletproof bookkeeping courses also. Any members of 97 and up, whenever I launch a new course, get it for like half the price that anybody else gets them for. So I make sure that there's lots of benefits.
Seth, just to kind of add on, 97 and up. Imagine a place you can go to when you have a question or a challenge within your accounting practice on how to do this or that, not just limited to QuickBooks or a certain app. You've got a whole community that you can go into, and you can ask that question, and you have other professionals, like-minded professionals, that are going to help try to find a solution for you. And when there are things, if somebody doesn't have an answer, we look together to try to figure something out. It's a great place, number one, for mentorship. If you want to expand and build your own practice, it's a great place to go, feel comfortable about it, amazing environment, and I'm super happy to be part of it.
Thank you. It's accountants and bookkeepers, and we have every range of experience. We have people who are just barely starting out, and we have like very experienced CPAs and enrolled agents in the program. I think that's what makes it kind of special is if you're a newbie, you have access to a ton of experience. And even the experienced people tell me they're always learning new things and they love it. So, it covers the whole range. And, I once asked people, and I was afraid I might be shooting myself in the foot here, but I was like, why bother with 97 and up in our Slack workspace when you can just go into any number of Facebook groups, which are free? And the answer I got consistently from everybody, very honestly, was that they feel that the quality of the answers they get are much more reliable in 97 and up. Maybe because it's something people have to pay for. You just get, again, a little better quality of experience and input and responses from people. So that was my answer. And I was obviously happy to see that people weren't going to say, you know what, you're right, and quit 97 and up and go run and join all the Facebook groups. So that was essentially what the answers boiled down to.
Seth, how do the folks in the chat get access to, will it be in the follow-up?
Yeah, I'm going to send a follow-up email. I don't want to show you, if you go onto my website and sign up for 97 and up, you're not going to get to take advantage of this offer. So
Right.
I'm going to send a follow-up email with a link that takes you to a specific page that you won't find anywhere else on my website, so that you can, so that way I'll know when you sign up for either of the two options, you'll be automatically granted access to the 4-hour workshop. I don't know when it's going to be. I kind of want to gauge how many people actually take advantage of this, so I have a bit of a head count. And of course, it'll be recorded. So whenever it is, if you can't make it, you'll be able to get the recordings. So yeah, I'll send the link out in the email follow-up that will take you directly to the place where you want to sign up for this, and that way you'll get the 4-hour workshop, like I said. So yeah, I'm looking in the chat. Yeah, it can be frustrating. You can get conflicting. The other thing I want to say, and I've gotten this feedback from people, I've seen it happen too in Facebook, where somebody who's newer goes in and asks a question and they get their head chopped off with things like, oh, if you have to ask that question, you shouldn't be a bookkeeper. And it's like, no, everybody had to start somewhere. You will never see that happen in 97 and up. I wouldn't allow it. And it's also just not the nature of the people who are in there that any of us would ever treat somebody that way. So in other words, it's a very safe place, especially for people who are new. The experienced people aren't worried about that, obviously, but for people who are new, that you might be afraid to ask a question because you don't want to look dumb. We encourage dumb questions in 97 and up because it is a compassionate, judgment-free zone.
The only dumb question is the one that doesn't get asked.
Exactly. Sing it. The condescending folks need to remember they learn. Yeah, I've seen it happen. I actually, in my own Facebook group, I had to come down on somebody for doing that to somebody else. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, and it is 1/4 past the hour, I will let this go. Thank you for that follow-up. This group is what I'm looking for to grow. Perfect. So like I said, within the next hour or two, I'll send the follow-up email out. I just have to make sure that the links and everything work, and I'll get this out to you all. So any of you who want to take advantage of this can, and of course, please, by all means, share it with others. Anybody else that you think might benefit from taking advantage of this. And I'll remind you all that the recording of this program will be up on the Nerd's Guide to the Galaxy blog within the next day or two, as soon as it's been processed. All right. And Greg and Matthew, as always, I truly, truly and deeply appreciate the two of you and all the help that you give me.
But of course.
Thanks for the info, my friend.